In 1987, at just 13 years old, Craig Price committed his first murder. Price broke into a home only 2 houses away from his own. Once inside, he took a weapon from the kitchen and injured 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer. She would later pass away due to her wounds. Craig simply went back to normal life for the next 2 years. During this entire time, Rebecca's case went unsolved. September 1st, 1989. Craig Price struck again, just a few houses down from his first victim. High on marijuana and LSD, Price ended the life of 39-year-old Joan Heaton and her 2 children, 10-year-old Jennifer and 7-year-old Melissa. This terrible crime would, however, prove to be his undoing. After not hearing from her, Joan Heaton's mother Marie and sister Mary Lou went to the residence to check on her. Joan's car was still parked outside, but when no one answered the door, they knew something was wrong. Inside, they found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Marie thought back to just a couple of days prior when she had been out shopping with her daughter and grandchildren. Overcome by grief, she could hardly comprehend what had just happened. The police quickly responded to the scene. The scene was enough to bring even the most seasoned investigator to tears. They vowed to work day and night to find out who had done this. They even went so far as to bring in one of the FBI's top criminal profilers, Greg O. McCrary. Greg McCrary was able to analyze the evidence found so far and come up with a suspect profile for investigators to work from. He suggested that the crime was like a burglary gone bad, and that the suspect probably lived in the neighborhood, as people often burglarize homes that they're familiar with. He also stated that due to the frantic nature of the incident, the suspect had probably injured himself by accident. Therefore, officers should be on the lookout for anyone with injuries on their hands. Furthermore, he said that the recent case was most likely connected with the unsolved murder of Rebecca from 2 years earlier, seeing as the crime scenes were so similar. Little did he know just how on the nail he was with his profile. Police began staking out the area, looking for potential suspects. Detectives Ray Pendergast and Mark Brandreth were driving through the park when Pendergast spotted a familiar face. They stopped the car to talk to a neighborhood boy named Craig Price, who was just 15 at the time. Pendergast had also once coached Price in a local basketball program. Pendergast asked Price if he had heard about the crimes. Craig responded with concern that yes, he was aware of what happened. He went on to say that he had seen the family coming out of the house the day before, as he lived just a few doors away from the Heaton family. During the conversation, Pendergast and Brandreth both noticed that Craig had a bandage on his hand. Suspicious, Pendergast asked how he hurt himself. Craig claimed that he got drunk several nights earlier and punched his hand through a car window on Keeley Avenue. Though the detectives were suspicious, they found it hard to believe a boy like Craig could have committed such terrible crimes. Nonetheless, they felt suspicious enough to follow up on Craig's story. They learned that there was no police report of a car window being smashed in the area Craig mentioned. They also went to Keeley Avenue and found no evidence of glass on the street. Now the 2 detectives were beginning to doubt the boy's story. At the Heaton residence, forensic evidence was still being collected. One particular clue found was a bloody sock print left by the suspect. A size 13 sock print, to be exact. Craig Price wore a size 13 shoe. The teenage boy also had a history of criminal offenses such as drug abuse, theft, and was known to have a violent temper. Unlikely as it may have been, Price was shaping up to be their guy. Investigators brought Craig and his parents down to the station for further questioning. At first, Craig maintained his story about the cut on his hand. Unconvinced, detectives asked him to take a polygraph test. When the results came back, they showed that Craig had been lying. During interviews with Craig's friends and acquaintances, investigators learned that he ran with a gang of juvenile delinquents who were known to burglarize houses. More significantly, they discovered that Craig boasted about the crime committed against Rebecca Spencer. This was cause enough to obtain a search warrant for the Price residence. Detective Kevin Collins, Arthur Anderson, and Tim Colgan organized a search team. They devised a plan to set up overnight surveillance of the house before actually going in to search the residence. They wanted to make sure Craig was there and didn't leave the premises. Once they were sure he was home, they moved in on the house. Everyone in the home was asked to sit in the living room while the search was being conducted. Though everyone else was clearly distressed by the situation, Craig seemed unbothered as he went back to sleep on the couch. It wasn't long before the police found what they were looking for. Out in the shed behind the house, officers found a trash bag full of bloody towels and gloves, as well as the blood-stained weapons from the Heaton household. Investigators woke Craig up and arrested him for the deaths of Joan, Jennifer, and Melissa. Surprisingly, he seemed unaffected. In the interrogation room, investigators got more than they bargained for. Craig spoke matter-of-factly with a calm demeanor as he confessed to the murders he had committed. He told his interrogators that his primary intention was to burglarize the house. He said that he had crawled through an open window in the kitchen. He accidentally landed on a table, which broke, but despite the noise, he continued with his burglary. He claimed that he walked through the residence looking for items to steal. He just hadn't realized that the noise had awakened Joan. Joan walked into the kitchen, then spotted Craig when she turned on the light. In a state of panic, Craig said that he grabbed Joan. Joan's screams woke up the children, who in turn stumbled out of their beds to the hallway. Melissa ran to the kitchen to call police, but Craig overpowered her. This is when it took a terrible turn for this loving family. Craig said that during the crime, he had accidentally injured his hand. He removed the gloves he was wearing and tended to his injuries in the bathroom. He didn't realize that he had left a trail of blood and sock prints behind him. His mother was horrified, and his father had to run to the men's room to vomit. He was unable to return for the remainder of the interrogation. Craig further surprised investigators when they asked him about Rebecca Spencer. He immediately confessed to that crime as well, showing little remorse in the process. He recounted in great detail what had happened that night. In the span of just a few hours, 4 terrible crimes had been solved. All that was left to do now was to prosecute this evil 15-year-old child that sat before them. This, however, was when the real battle began. Craig Price had the law on his side. Despite the brutal crimes he had committed, Craig would never have to face a trial or serve prison time because he confessed to his crimes just weeks before his 16th birthday. According to Rhode Island state law, all the courts could do was hold him in a training school until his 21st birthday, and no longer. Thus, after 5 years, Craig would be a free man with a clean record. After a brief court hearing, Craig was placed in a maximum security youth correctional center and ordered to undergo intense psychiatric treatment. However, Craig withdrew from the diagnostic and treatment program arranged by the judge on the advice of his lawyers. According to court documents, the reasoning behind this decision was based on fears that the psychiatric examination might result in his being placed in a psychiatric facility for commitment beyond his 21st birthday. By 1993, Craig had developed a reputation for good behavior within the training school, despite the fact that he had refused treatment. In fact, he was in such good standing that his superiors granted him permission to counsel other youths at the facility. It was also suggested that Craig performed light security duties, which included patrolling the school's hallways. Craig was even allowed to make a rap video at the school, which included insanely threatening lyrics. When the news broke of Craig's special treatment at the facility, Rhode Island citizens and the families of the victims demanded that it be stopped. After much protest, it ended, but the bigger problem still remained. Time was running short, and Craig's release date was steadily approaching. They had less than 1.5 years to work out a way to prevent him from being freed. 4 figures were instrumental in the campaign to stop Craig's release. Joan Heaton's mother, Marie, her sister, Mary Lou, Captain Kevin Collins, who led the Heaton investigation, and Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Pine. Together, they founded a nonprofit group called Citizens Opposed to the Release of Price, Corp., which focused on lobbying against the release of Price and getting legislation passed. In 1990, Pine and Collins were key figures in instigating the passing of the O'Neill Bill, which toughened sentences for teenage offenders. In 1993, Pine introduced a controversial bill that would give the Office of the Attorney General the power to civilly commit a mentally ill individual to a mental institution if the person posed a danger to society. In May 1994, President Bill Clinton flew to Providence, where he was scheduled to meet and discuss state affairs. He was met by thousands of demonstrators and a circling airplane that carried the banner, "Alert, Killer of 4, Craig Price, moving here." It was clear that the citizens of Rhode Island wanted something done about the Craig Price matter, and they were not going to give up until the problem was solved. In a televised interview, President Clinton expressed his dismay about Craig being let out in approximately 6 months. He suggested that the records of juvenile offenders should not be sealed, but publicly accessible. He also mentioned that the laws needed to be changed to prevent juveniles with a violent history from purchasing firearms. Just 15 days after President Clinton aired his comments, Rhode Island lawmakers reviewed bills concerning public access to juvenile criminal records and juvenile gun laws. On June 8, 1994, Craig was indicted on 1 count of simple assault and extortion for threatening to injure Officer Mark Petrella, a training school employee. That same month, Craig faced another problem. His refusal to submit to psychiatric examinations and therapy had gone on too long. He was found guilty for contempt of court, and another year was added to his sentence. The only way to reduce the penalty was to submit to the psychiatric treatment he had so long refused. After almost 5 years, Craig finally complied. However, it was found that he did not wholeheartedly participate in the assessment, and he lied about events surrounding the crimes. During his trial for the assault charges against Mark Petrella, which was nationally televised, Craig's true colors began to show when he flew into a rage while testifying on his own behalf. Craig was found guilty on both counts of extortion and simple assault. According to Lang, when the verdict was read, those listening seemed to feel that what he was really found guilty of was the long-ago crimes. Judge Needham sentenced him to 15 years, 8 of which were suspended. According to a 2004 article in the Providence Journal, Craig bit a correctional officer's finger during a brawl in February 1996. The article stated that prosecutors took the uncommon step of charging him for probation violation, even though he was still imprisoned. He was also charged with assault. Craig was found guilty and sentenced to an additional year in prison. The next year, Craig's failure to comply with the court-ordered psychiatric evaluations via lying resulted in him receiving an additional 25 years on top of his other sentences. 10 of the years were to be served outright with 15 years probation. To this day, there is still no sure way to tell when or if Craig Price will ever be released. Though considering he has been quoted saying he will make history by striking again when he does get out, one can't help but hope that he never does. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.